Welcome to On Top of the Covers, a weekly podcast by Orlove dedicated to all of you amazing people, the creative visionaries, the entrepreneurs, artists, makers, disruptors, you guys who are constantly outside of the box and experimenting and trying new things in your path of self-discovery. And I love that because that's really where the disruptors of the world come from, right? From all of you. And every week we feature really inspirational stories of other people disrupting in some way, trying out new paths and contributing to the culture of music. And we look at how they do it creatively, artistically. As you guys always know, we talk about that personally, professionally. And, I'm so grateful to have you guys here. I'm Matt Gottesman. I'm your host and director of the Orlove brands. You can easily find us at We Are Orlove on Instagram and at Matt Gottesman. You guys know for nearly a decade, I answer each and every single reply, response, text, DM, you name it. And, happy to do so because I create community across all of the web. And that's really what this is all about. And a bigger reason of why we do this, music is one of the biggest connectors in the world, right? And it's a common bond. So we wanted to open up the conversations, not only around the art, but also contributors or missions, and look at unconventional paths to success, which is a very arbitrary word. Success is really defined by the individual. So we're going to dive right in. I've got another incredible guest today with a phenomenal background, and we're going to go through a little bit of that, but I'd rather her also tell a little bit more of her journey and her story. Connie Chow, she's the executive vice president of Little Empire. And we're going to dive into a few new themes and recurring themes that have come up as of recent. The importance of mentorship, which I cannot stress how important that is in general in your growth. Finding people who can guide you while you do the work. That's respecting your mentors, by the way. Diversifying everything, right? Your income streams, your marketing, your sounds. You've heard this on previous episodes. You've never had more of an opportunity to really create and move in a way that you have greater ownership and more diversity of income, okay? And we've talked a little bit about that, but we're going to get Connie's take and go a little bit deeper on that. We're going to continue the conversation around mental health for artists and industry professionals because we're living in a perfectly good time to talk about mental wellness. And we're going to also take a little further look at the dance industry comparatively moving into next year versus, 2019 and previously. So real quick background, Connie, executive vice president of Los Angeles-based artist management company, Little Empire Music. She oversees an international roster of 30 artists and has helped guide the careers of industry icons such as Galantis, Cinti Gold, Cascade, Nicole Maudeber. She spent 7 years at Little Empire honing her craft as an artist manager, proven track record of helping artists achieve their dreams on a scale most could never imagine. So, and as humble as can be. Currently the manager for LEM acts, including Sam I, Justin J, JSTJR, Huxley Ann, and Cryptogram. She's also overseen the career of the globetrotting Swedish duo Galantis since before their first ever show at Coachella in 2014. She's got some staying power. And in one of dance music's biggest international success stories of the past decade, Chow helped shape the intricate campaigns for all of Galantis' wildly successful albums, which has garnered over 3 billion streams. That is not easy. And 100 RIAA certifications. Furthermore, the touring behemoth of Galantis benefited from Connie's keen understanding of international touring, as the Grammy-nominated duo has performed at iconic venues, including Greek Theater in Los Angeles, the O2 Academy in Brixton, as well as just about every major festival across the globe. And while at Little Empire, she oversaw the release of acclaimed genre-bending luminary Cinti Gold's most recent genre-defying project, I Don't Want, the Goldfire Session. And prior to working with Galantis and Cinti Gold, she played a crucial role in the management team for dance music headliner Cascade. So you've done some amazing things. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. I first and foremost want to say that microphone makes your voice sound like butter. It is lovely hearing your voice. What's up, everyone? My name is Connie. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm very, very happy to be here today.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. We're going to get a little bit into your background of how we got through the more humanistic side of the journey, because it's always easy to read the highlights, but I love talking about kind of the realizations along the way.
Yeah.
We do something a little untraditional. Most people wait for rapid fire questions at the end. We do not do it that way, which I love. We like to do them right at the beginning, and it really opens up kind of shows the creative mind, if you will. So without further ado, are you ready?
Give them.
Okay. If all music was wiped away from the face of the earth, this is a tough one sometimes for people, but if all music was wiped away from the face of the earth, but you're allowed to save 3 albums and 3 albums only to listen to for the rest of your life, what would they be?
I think I owe all of my emotional maturity to Miss Amy Winehouse. So her Back to Black album is something that I would listen to forever. It's also such a cathartic album. When I can't find words to emote what I'm feeling, she does it for me. So her, forever and always. The Strokes, Is This It? I think The Strokes will always be one of my favorite bands. I grew up in a really small, very little town that was very like top 40s oriented. And I had a friend in high school who showed me the Strokes album. And I was like, oh my God, there's actually good music out there. And so it honestly was one of my intro albums that got me into music to begin with. And then I wanted to pick something current and also something in dance music, since that is my world. And I thought that Fred again built such a beautiful, beautiful album. And for anyone who's listening and is a Grammy voting person, if that album does not get nominated this year, I'm going to be really upset.
Incredible. Those are actually really, really, really great choices. And sometimes question 2 relates to 1, sometimes it doesn't. But name an influential person, living or non-living. And I always stress this, it can be anybody throughout all of history that if you can interact with for one night, who would they be?
It's going to be hands down Miss Dolly Parton on that one. I think I didn't grow up with her, so I didn't grow up listening to her music, and I wasn't very familiar with her until my adult life. And I think beyond just a musician and a businesswoman, her mantra for life and the way she approaches life is really beautiful. And I've spent a lot of time listening to podcasts, and the podcast she does with Brene Brown is where she just speaks about finding love and spreading love, and what she believes in is so beautiful. And also, man, she is in the credits of the Moderna vaccine and everything. I got to give it up for that woman. I would love to have a coffee with her and just ask her questions.
Well, in this case, you can actually get an entire day or night, like just talking about anything and everything.
Everything, yeah. I want to go to her amusement park. I've not done that. I want to eat with her. I want to, would love that.
So much experience too, she's seen so much, and she's really navigated much of her career and really taken a lot of chances.
Yes.
And really, stood up for her belief systems along the way,
Yeah, knocked down so many walls, and also is so true to herself and so self-aware. On top of that, what a woman.
Right. She's got days and days and years but I was going to say days where you could sit and be like, just give it to me. I'm just going to sit here and observe and listen for at least, maybe ask a few questions, but just go, just spill it all out. Okay. Question number 3, in your opinion, what's the best music focused film for you of all time? And I stress this, it can be like a docuseries, it could be, a rockumentary, it could be fictitious, it could be, music is kind of at its core central theme. You get where I'm going with that. What would be the movie for you?
So this is I think maybe a little bit of a non-traditional answer, but again, it kind of relates back to me growing up in a really small town and not having a big diversity of music to choose from. But when Garden State came out, the soundtrack impacted me deeply. And I think it was my first exposure to Thievery Corporation, the Shins. There's a Bright Eyes. There's a few introductions to artists that I had never listened to before, and several different kinds of genres. And I think for the time, it was a really intelligent soundtrack.
I remember it. I think I still actually have the physical CD
copy
of it.
Me too. With the car, and then on top of the car.
Yeah, it's in the. I mean, because I'm all MP3 obviously, but I have boxes in storage of all the CDs, including all the sleeves as well. But
yeah, if you wanted a bit more of a traditional, what is traditional even? If you wanted just a documentary, which I'd never seen before, the Clive Davis documentary on Netflix. When I watched it, that man has had his hands in so much music that I wasn't even aware of. Incredible.
I was interested in Arista Records and almost took an internship back there when I was about 20. And it was interesting. He's always adapted and stayed close to the ground of culture and music and newness. So he was never stuck in any one era or one thing. Yeah. And I always found that fascinating to watch him be able to like no matter how much older he got, he'd be like, I like that sound. I like what you're doing. That. Like he stuck to adaptation and which is a winning formula always. Yeah. Right.
And then talk about also coming from he's a lawyer and was like, I just like music.
Right. Incredible. Okay. So, and then question number 4, what's an important book, podcast, Audible, anything that has helped you navigate your creativity and passion?
So my background, I went to school for biology and thought I wanted to be a doctor. And right after I graduated school, someone had given me The Alchemist by Paul Coelho. I don't know how to say his.
It's my favorite. My favorite.
Yes. And what is interesting is when I read it when I was 22, when I graduated college, I took the book for a very surface level understanding because he talks a lot about your personal journey and what you are meant to accomplish on earth and having it align with your soul. So that is actually what kind of gave me a little bit of courage to quit my bio background and to really do something that was authentically me. And then I reread it over COVID and found a much deeper, different understanding of it. And it kind of goes back to what you've been saying, like being able to adapt and change directions. And he has this analogy in there about being like the wind. The wind will go in one way and then it'll go into another way. And that's the only way you can really survive. And I resonated a lot more with that this time around instead of just the personal journey.
Context, because now you're coming with years of context. Yeah. First time I ever read it was 22. I have it right there in my bio on Instagram, right next to my name. It says Alchemist. It's my favorite. People always ask me about that. It got a lot of different meanings from me. I read it every couple of years.
Yeah.
I even read it in Spanish when I was practicing my Spanish. And most recently I listened to the Audible was with Jeremy Irons. I'm like, not bad, but I like reading it. I love that book. And you're right. It is applicable at every stage of your life. And it's every person's individual journey. And there's a lot of beautiful lessons in there about moving forward.
Yeah.
Real understanding about love, not at the surface level we sometimes, have. Following through on our mission and our journey and being, boldly stepping into that. A lot of different things, right? Being around wise people and learning, adaptation.
And having patience.
Oh my God. It's all
the hardest patience. Lesson of all. Yeah.
It is. The long game is a patient game. And if you can master patience or at least practice it every day, life becomes a lot more fun, and so does the journey and the process. Actually embracing the process,
and also not sacrifice per se, but knowing that you're gonna have to give something up, but if you look at the wider view, it's gonna pay off in the long run with the sheep, because he was like, why am I giving up my sheep? But and being open to that idea.
He knew I can always go back, but we know what's back. Exactly. I don't know what's forward. So I gotta keep moving forward. And I really, right? Yeah. Oh, and for anybody listening, first of all, go get the book if you haven't already read it. And second, because throughout your life, each time you have a fall, you can look at it and go, well, I can always go back to what I know. But there's always something in you that's guiding you forward. But I already know what that is. And if I don't do what I'm feeling called to, even if I don't understand it, I'll die with that regret inside, or I won't evolve the soul.
There's a quote, not from the book, but a very similar concept, that heartbreak is transient, but regret is eternal. It's okay to get your heart broken.
Yeah.
But regret is an eternal thing.
Right. I actually found that when the heart breaks, it's really the ego. Your heart is your truth.
Yeah.
Right? Your heart breaks because you had all these attachments and these ideas on the outcomes. And then if time and patience serves well, you go, oh, that's why that didn't work. Oh my God, that's perfect. Amazing. Well, I'd love to dive right in and have you share your background, because I only gave the audience the highlight reel, and you're so much more than the highlight reel. And I would love for you to humanize the journey a little bit and talk about, you can go as far back, what first prompted you into music, or even as a child, whatever it might be, as far back as you want to go. How do we get to today? And you can make a few stops along the way.
Yeah, I should rewrite my bio with the struggles. I should do like a part A and part B, because
Yes.
I mean, whatever, but the highlights. But it's like this. This is what I really went through. But I grew up. I am the child of two beautiful immigrant parents, and when I was growing up, I was only educated in certain jobs that, adult serious jobs.
Right.
And so I
Mm-hmm.
grew up thinking that I needed to be a doctor, and I fulfilled my Chinese expectations through college. And I really do love science. I think it's so fascinating, and I think it's so applicable to the world, because you learn about your body, you learn about why things work, and I really enjoy it, and I do love learning about it. And when I graduated school, I worked for GE Healthcare for 1.5 years in their research and development department, and it was really noble. It sounds great. I was doing research on cancer biopsies, because when you biopsy a piece of tissue and you run a test on it, you can only use that tissue once. And for something like breast cancer, you can take quite a bit of a big chunk out. But if it's brain cancer or something much more delicate, you only have a very small piece of tissue to work with. So my job doing that was figuring out how to reverse tests so we could use the same piece of tissue twice. And super noble, sounds so great on paper. And I hated it. I just was not enjoying it, because I was 22 years old, and I was stuck in a lab for 8 hours a day that had no windows. And I talked to no one except for myself and the microscope that I was working under. And I could not see myself doing that. Every single day was me counting down the hours until I could get out of there. And when I was in college, I really enjoyed all the social programs that I was working, all the social crews and all my extracurricular stuff that I was doing that involved people and organizing. And I loved music. I was a little bunny raver in college, and I was like, I love dance music. It's something that resonates with me, and I would love to get involved in it. And my friend at the time, he was an assistant at WME on Suzanne Bratner's desk at Avi, and he was like, well, let's have you do this then. And so he helped me with putting my resume together and teaching me how to critically think, I think, for because you can critically think in science, but how do you critically think in life? Yes. And he was the first person to really open my eyes about it, because he's like, you need to have an opinion on things. And that was when streaming, well, no, not even, it was when piracy was still a big issue. And he was like, you need to have an opinion on what you think like LimeWire and all that stuff is doing to the music industry and what it's going to look like moving forward. So he's the first person who really got me to think quite critically about how culture affects a business. And I ended up getting a artist liaison job with Insomniac for EDC. And that is when I met Stephanie LaFera for the very first time, my future boss and mentor of almost a decade. And she scared the living shit out of me when I first met her. And I ended up finding my way to Little Empire doing digital marketing, and trained and lived under Stephanie LaFera, and still do and she basically crafted me into who I am today. So I owe it all to that woman for opening doors for me. And then since then, I've kind of just grown as a manager in the dance space. Dance music is still where my heart lies. And then I've ventured out a little bit, and have also now started working at Fuga Distribution, doing marketing strategy for dance and electronic. So still doing artist management and working at Little Empire, and then also fulfilling a different side of me, doing marketing strategy for distribution.
I love it because you've got such a diverse background. Well, I'll start with when you said how culture affects the business. So when you so I think that's such a valuable point that is so sometimes missing. Because people ask me, they're like, well, you do digital marketing and you do media and you do like, branding and design and UI, UX and tech and back end and front end. I'm like, you don't understand. I'm like, all the components affect the people we're trying to affect.
Yes.
And when we understand the people we're trying to affect, we want to understand how we're delivering value and making their lives, intertwined and better with the thing we're delivering. And that's why I think you're multifaceted and have these amazing skill sets, right? Because of, diving into certain areas, and then it brings you to incredible opportunities. In other words, you just kind of dove right in and were like, I'm going to figure this out and figure that out. And I think sometimes people forget that. Like, people ask all the time, like, well, how do you know this stuff? I'm like, Google, YouTube. Yeah. They didn't teach this in school. I went to school for other degrees, but they didn't teach us in school. I had no choice. And since I had to come up with every single platform from Napster to TikTok and everything in between, it was like, oh, this is a cool new widget. So what's happening currently with little, because you're managing Little Empire and you got this role with Fuga. How do you do it all? How do you, what I would imagine you have probably some really great people around you.
Yeah. Yes. Both teams on both sides are beautiful, and I think the infrastructure is there, and the mutual trust that you have to have in a team in order for things to run smoothly, and communication is everything. I think that if you think you are a good communicator, then that is your first problem. Communication is something that you consistently need to work on, because there's so many different kinds of people and so many different sectors of the business that you just have to continually work on your communication, and the kind of like what you said earlier, just eating your ego. It's not about you. It's about something way, way bigger.
It's an interesting thing to work on your EQ, because the greater our self-awareness and observation of like our emotions, our triggers, our growth, our everything, a better us makes a better communicator over time, so we can better understand, A, it's not about me, even if they're upset and they're pointing it at me. And B, how do I better understand that individual so they feel seen, felt, and heard. But I can also help, not enable, but help. Like, how do we empower, not enable, for growth? So we're all, it's practice.
Yeah, and also just like a veg. And I think the music industry has changed quite a bit in the past few years, because I think it used to be quite a bit more backstabby, but now it's I help you, you help me, we all grow together.
What do you attribute that to? I would love to get your take on that. I have some ideas, but I would love to hear your take on that.
I think there's just so much more space for collaboration now. Yes. And now that everything lives on a worldwide scale, and that makes it just, there's so much space. There's room for the table for everyone. And I think previously speaking, there was very limited spaces on the iTunes store. There was limited spaces on the shelves at retailers, and there was only, your set amount of record labels, and people weren't able to distribute really music on their own. And so it got much, much, much more competitive. But now that there are so many options for everyone and everything is so worldwide, there's so many opportunities that it only benefits if you can bring each other up instead of pushing people off the cliff in order to get up higher.
I love it. The internet changed the game for good.
Yeah.
It changed it for good, because it's like, oh, you're not allowing me a seat at the table. I'm going to build my table over here. The whole table. And to your point on collaboration, I'm going to put a seat here for so-and-so, and a seat here for so-and-so, and a seat here for so-and-so, because they're going through the same things. I think we'll all come together. We'll build some leverage, like a lot of leverage, like all the leverage.
All leverage. I also think the way that algorithms are set up across every single platform, when you come together and you get this cross-pollination between multiple parties, it only brings everyone up as a whole. So being off on your own, doing everything alone, siloed, is not going to help you in any way.
I will say, because there's so many different facets of social media, and we'll get into mental wellness and stuff like that later on. But I do like that there's a component of it that does force you into collaboration. I remember when I started back in 2014, and it was before the algorithm change, in fairness, on Instagram. So to get to hundreds of thousands organically was a little bit easier then. But all that was that people would say, like, how do you do it? And I'm like, well, we're all just celebrating each other's work and crediting each other. And then their audience sees my stuff, my audience sees their stuff, and we just grow it. That was the true, I mean, the original pods, the original like growing on social, all that stuff was really how that came about. None of us really knew what we were doing. We're just like, well, you and I love your content, let's share. And I think it forced collaborations that would not normally have come together. And I think that bled over into music. Oh, I like your sound. I haven't actually tried that. You know what? You're country and I'm R&B, or you're electronic and I'm hip hop. Like, let's do something.
And also like how music has gotten a bit more genre agnostic.
Yes.
And that allows for more, because what is pop music? What is dance music? Pop music sounds like dance music sounds like pop music. And that has allowed for people to kind of experiment a bit more.
So true. And so you've got years of experience, you've got teams you're managing, you've been around so many artists, and I want to talk a little bit about mentorship, but first I want to start with, from an artist side, management. I think good management is also inclusive of what you're saying with communication, and in a way of mentorship, a way of, let me get your back. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're right. I do think that the industry used to be one way, very much so. That's probably why I didn't fit in. It's like, no, we all collaborate. We all win. What are you talking about? But with artists, how, can you talk us through a little bit about the mentorship side that comes in, where I don't want to just manage you. I want to help and grow you in a way where also like you feel empowered and you feel like you're mentally well and you're physically well and you're creative constantly. Like, there's a lot in there in management. So I'd love to you to touch a little bit on the mentorship side with the artists, and then of course, just as a whole with, a lot of your, colleagues.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people, just like athletes and everything that's happening right now with Simone Biles, people forget that, yes, the artist is the product, but also the artist is a human being. And if you're not taking care of them as a whole, then how do you expect that their output is going to be any good? And so I think a really big part of an artist or being a manager is helping your artist believe in themselves and stay true to who they are. And you touched upon this earlier. The internet is great, but the internet is also such a mean place. And they've just spent all this time creating their soul and putting it out for the world to have. And then people are just like ripping on them. And it's a huge part of being a manager, being like, no, you did something that is great for you. And most art in this world is not even appreciated until way later down the line. So fuck them all. Don't just do you and what makes you feel good, because I think you can't have good music unless the artist feels good about it. And at the end of the day, the artist just needs to be genuine to themselves. And it's a big part on the management side to empower them to do that and give them the space to do that. If you need to block them off and just not have touring for 2 months out of the year so that they could go to Patagonia to write and be creative and not read comments online, like, you need to allow them to have the space to do that. And not have them tour, or just create a place where they feel safe, because ultimately everything feeds into the same ecosystem. And if one part is malfunctioning, the whole thing is going to malfunction.
Long-term sustainability. And, anything you water, like, will grow much more peacefully and harmoniously, or you hope.
Hopefully,
and I'm so happy to hear that, because creatively expressing yourself takes a tremendous amount of work. Courage, work, a work ethic, a tapping it, a channeling. Like, it is a pouring out of your soul and how you're having a relationship with it, and the energy that goes into that. Of course,
yeah.
yes, it is. Yeah. So I think it's phenomenal that if we know that we have to come first because happier, healthier me can produce greater and affect others even greater, then we also have to do it for others too. And in order to do it for others, we do have to still put ourselves first. So we can actually have the tools and resources to be like, I'm recognizing this in you. How do you know? Because I recognize it in me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's a huge level of empathy that is needed. And I think it comes, I learned it from Steph and watching her, because she became a mother as she was my mentorship, and how she is as a mother is also how she is as a manager. And I think that is really, really powerful.
And the people we're around that set the example are everything. That set a great example are everything. And so, do the artists feel like the space is open for them to, like with you, do they come to you like, hey, am I crazy here? Or like, hey, I'm dealing with this. Like, are we in a place now where more and more people are speaking up about what they're feeling, not so much, the blaming of the world. I mean, but like what they're going through internally.
Even coming down to like, hey, can you read this email before I send it? Or, hey, actually, this conversation is really difficult for me, and it's kind of hinging on the creative process. I need you to step in here. And that's when I'm like, yeah, plug me in. I'll have the uncomfortable conversation so that the creatives can stay creative, and then the business people can handle some of the not as sexy stuff. And then also, I hope that we've created a space where if an artist is like, I don't have it in me today to do all these interviews and answer all of these meaningless questions that you could just Google, that we'll cancel the interviews.
Right. You bring up such a great point about, the keyboard warriors out there, right? That are, they can be so mean. And I feel like it's also a great way to learn to your point about, I mean, not that artists always have this time, but I mean, we're all, I think, artists in some way. And I think that when the comments come out, it's sort of like there's one of three options. Either option, it's a great teachable moment, like, hey, depending on how they say something, it's a blockable moment. Like, hey, you know what? Like, we don't like this around our community. That's not, the idea, I think, of treating things more like a community. And I feel like artists were some of the original to do that, like, hey, because they started off, a lot of them started off underground. That was the thing. And they cultivating that community and that allegiance to their community of like, we don't tolerate that here. Or, the following, like, hey, you know what? It's really just not, they're maybe having a bad day. But it's an interesting thing to see the psychology of other people in relation to ourselves sometimes for that practice. Not easy. In fact, most of the time it's not easy. Actually, almost all the time it's not easy, but there's that expression, it doesn't get easier, you just get better. Do you feel like the mental health is getting better and better? I mean, if they can get rid of the bravado side of like, I'm great, that doesn't affect me. Like, no. Like, it's okay if it actually is internally in some way. Let's lean into it. Do you feel like I think that the mental health is getting better? Because, we've lost a few good ones along the way the last few years.
We've lost a lot of good ones. I can't confidently say that it's getting better. I think it's something that we need to actively, consistently, and always work on, kind of just like communication. I think it's so hard. I think it's better to navigate around touring because that's such a taxing,
right.
Waking up in a different time zone all the time. That is much, much easier to control. The comments online, that is relentless.
Right.
And I don't quite know how to protect artists against the comments online. I think as a society, we're waking up, maybe being a bit more aware that artists are human beings, because a lot of artists have stood up and said, like, my mental health is not okay. And I think the conversation is starting, but it is not where it needs to be anywhere close to it yet.
I'm hopeful. I think we're a long ways away. And, influence is also a very powerful drug. And depending on where somebody is at emotionally, when that can come out, and how what they're going through can affect millions and millions of people. I think is a conversation that needs to be more had of, it's like, especially, are they responding from a trigger? Are they, are they, and it would make sense, but you're right. If the vulnerability comes out, that let's drop the bravado and the ego and be like, you know what, like, listen guys, like, I love and appreciate everybody. It is actually tough when you, like, real talk. Like, it is tough. It is real tough. Like, when, you say these things like, do I love my work and you make me like it less? No. Does it feel good when you say it? No. Do you know what kind of work that I do? Do you know how hard it is? No. Do you want to have that conversation? Do you want to come on a live and do that with me? We could actually talk about it, and I can actually show you, and like, we can actually, from a humanity standpoint, like, just drop all the masks and actually, like, let's lean in. Let's talk, right? That's what I'm hoping for. With social media at our fingertips and lives and, Discord communities and Twitch and everywhere, it's like, we might as well, we can have these combos. We'll come back to the mental wellness side, because one of the things that I think also contribute to is artists taking back a lot more of the control and ownership over their music. Yeah. It's a beautiful time. And I know you wanted to talk about diversification of income, which is one of my favorite topics, because business and spirituality, you can't go wrong with me. So I would love for you to just really, you can go on a tear, you can talk about, like, there's so many ways for artists now to not only have more control over what they're doing, but, really think outside the box, really diversify the way they do things. It's been a conversation on a couple podcasts, but I feel like there's so much left on the table to talk about it. So I'm looking forward to diving as deep as you want into it, but it's a real thing, and it's an exciting time.
Yeah. And I think, and I apologize if I'm repeating topics of stuff that people have already talked about before, but wow, the pandemic taught us more than anything that we need to diversify our income sources, because I don't think this will be the last pandemic in our lifetime. And I think if all of our touring is just coming from one source, it's really going to mess with our flow quite a bit. And so really paying attention to your fans and what they're interested in, and finding collaborations on all these different kinds of spaces, and also challenging yourself to be more creative and looking in non-traditional places is, I think, very important into how you can diversify your income. Because of course you have your standard categories with recorded music and remixes and merch and all of that. But with Twitch being such a big part of our world now since the pandemic, and finding ways for fans to donate or to tip or whatever, I think there's really cool places where you can bring in income. And also with Patreon and all of that stuff, you can really do whatever you want and create. Like, everyone has talents. You just have to kind of be a bit more reflective and think about what that is and refine it into a service. And you can do anything. You can be on Cameo if that doesn't jeopardize your brand, or you can have a whole service where you sing happy birthday to a few people. Like, there are a lot of options out there, and I think it's worthwhile exploring and being a little creative and growing outside of maybe what you're comfortable with, but and that's such a great way to find new fans too.
You bring up so many great points. The reflection part, I think, with democratization of artists, all people, creatives, being able to now make money in a variety of different ways, makes them reflective. How do I want to do it? And forces them into flow and movement versus, of course, a lot will just sit there. I get asked all the time. They're like, well, how do you know? I'm like, I don't know. I just keep putting stuff out there, and I like figure this out, and then I put that in there, and then I put that in there, and like, and I create myself through it as well too, like, because it feels right. I'm going with the feeling. But you're right. It forces them into forces them into reflection mode of like, why am I doing this? And does this feel right? And for how long should I do it until I change up direction? And so you bring that up, and then there's so many outlets, right, with that, with Patreon and Twitch and Discord, and even the badges now on Instagram lives, and and tipping and Venmo, and I mean, like, has so many different ways. Also, a really great point on your part about reflection, because what I have found a lot of people say is like, oh, like, I don't know what to charge. I don't know what to this. I don't know what to that. Or they feel awkward accepting money. And I'm like, so now we're talking about worthiness. I get it.
Yes.
And now we're going to go
It's
into some
quantified.
now we're going to go into some emotional stuff. Like, let's talk about that shit, let's talk about, and everybody deals with it sometimes. Like, you want to pay me for this? I like,
Yeah.
Often at times what's easy for us is not for everybody else. So we can get stuck in a loop of who would pay for that? Like, a lot of people.
A lot of people. And it's a Western thing where this is awkward and weird. But on Asian socials, like V Live, fans will tip just to watch someone eat cereal.
God bless.
So if you can, yeah. If you,
wow, that's awesome.
What I've noticed is a lot of artists in this time frame have just been really genuine. Like, yo, I'm not on the road anymore, and this is how I eat. So whatever y'all want to give is appreciated, and I think that people recognize. And yeah, and I had the pleasure of working with Gesture, who is LA based and lives in the bass world, and he, I think, is one who comes to mind all the time when I talk about diversifying your income streams, because that man in quarantine cooked tacos, and as raffles would raffle, like, and that's how he was making money, is he was cooking taco platters and dropping them off to people's houses so that they had a party platter before his live stream, and they had food for the live stream where he would DJ. And that man is so creative, and the tacos thing was on par with his brand to begin with, because he used to cook tacos before his show and one by one hand them out to his fans for free. But to be able to really reflect on his skill set and what he really loved doing and capitalizing off of it and making it an income stream.
Time off or a sudden removal of things we rely on push us into innovation and creativity.
Yeah. What is your tolerance for being uncomfortable?
Right. And it's a tough, uncertainty is tough. It's tough for everybody. But the more we can lean into and be like, okay, listen, I got to deal with this, and I got to deal with this fast. Like, yes, it sucks. I'm going to cry for about 5 minutes. I'm going to get that shit out. And then I got to do something. And I think when people, but I get it, that's coming from at least my tools and resources. I can see, and it took me years of cultivating that. So I can also understand what people probably felt really stuck last year in a lot of ways. We rely on a lot of things, and then all of a sudden when they're pulled away from us, it's like, wait a minute, what do I do now? Especially if we tie our identities to these things, right?
It all goes back to ego, isn't it?
Isn't it? Right? Fascinating thing to observe your own ego, And did a lot of artists, did you see a lot of really interesting things from the artists that you're tied closely to, like last year, what was their take, what they were going through when they're like, okay, touring's gone, what's next? What were some of the cool things you saw, other cool things, like other great examples that you saw?
Yeah, it depends on where the artist is. Justin J is another one who I really want to throw a hat out there for, because he took it to his own to start his own production classes, where it wasn't with masterclass or anything like that. He just did it on his own. And the thing that I thought was so beautiful about what he did is, because there's always a topic of the socioeconomic gap and a high barrier of entry going into dance music, because you have to have a computer, you have to have an Ableton license, you have to have all of these things, the plugins, that. And his class that he taught was, no, you can get the free license off of Ableton, and then there's no extra plugins. The class that I'm teaching it's going to force you to use what the default available tools are, and nothing else, because of course money can take you quite far, but do you have the creativity to work with only what you have? And the way that he structured his classes were just so interesting, and I think really empowering. Like he one of the weeks, he challenges his students to make as many tracks as possible in that week. And that is because most of your creative ideas come from are accidents, or you haven't thought too much about it, and those end up being your best ideas. And so he challenged his students to not think about it, to not sit on a track forever, but just to crank them out and just see what comes from it. And then often you'll find your gold nuggets that way.
I love it because, he didn't have to do it on masterclass.
Mm-mm.
So I'm an agile digital marketer and a funnels like guy in automations and things like that. And I think that it was so cool to see several artists in a lot of different industries, but mostly a lot in music last year say, you know what, I'm gonna do this. I'm at home, you're at home. We've got time to work. Let's work and make it affordable, and then show like the more agile ways to do things without all the expensive things. And I also thought that was really needed because it's sometimes hard to do courses when a lot of people who are doing courses aren't necessarily doing the work, versus last year there was a plethora of people who came in who are doing the work and like, oh, let me show you how I do it. And I'm doing it outside of masterclass.
Yeah.
Higher productivity, higher profitability, lower overhead costs. And as an artist, you're also not necessarily cutting that with masterclass, not to, put down masterclass. I think it's great, but just in witnessing some of your earlier on people who really have been doing that for some time, I thought it was just, it's a phenomenal way to connect even more so with community, the people that when you're like, because I think artists sometimes forget you have two types of people. Everybody really has two types of people to follow. They have the people who are just admiring the work, and then they have the people who want to do the work. So I believe every person has both ecospheres or both, demographics kind of following them, and to provide entertainment for one and education for the other, phenomenal, right? And that really allows them to diversify and have also more control over their income, and they can automate that.
Yeah. And then on the other end of the spectrum, for some artists who didn't necessarily need the income up front, they viewed last year as a marketing period because they've not slowed down to really connect with their fans.
Yes.
And all started Discords for the very first time, and we're speaking to fans one-on-one for the first time intimately, because you tour in front of them all the time, and you do see them. It's very passive though, but to really invest in getting to know your fan base, and that's just going to come full circle back when it comes time to sell a ticket, because these fans were able to speak to you in such an intimate way for the very first time that they're 100% going to buy a ticket to your show. So it was either you got really creative and found a service that you could offer, or looked at last year as an investment period and a marketing period where you could be more direct to your fan base for the first time.
It totally leveled the playing field and integrated everybody together.
Yes.
We're all in this. We're all like, there's no, I'm up here on this throne. And by the way, at no fault of the artist. It's a lot of times it's the audience that puts them onto a pedestal. I want no pedestals. I just want to be of the people, for the people, with the people, creating, growing community, always like integrated, always at the ground level. And it's funny when people, they can put you on a pedestal and be like, I'm figuring this shit out just like anybody else.
I don't know what's happening.
Now the talent made me a little bit more visible, but like I don't know what you do. Like, you do that stuff with digital marketing. I'm a musician. Oh my God. I'd love to learn more about that. You do stuff with fashion. I would love to do merch. How do you do that? Like, it integrated both fans and like the audience and the artists or the creatives in any really industry, and said, hey, like, let's like collaborate. Let's get together. So again, even more pushing the boundaries that I think subconsciously were placed there before by accident, just from, past generations pre-internet, Do you want to explain a little bit like what you're doing, like with Fuga, and like what's going on with that? Because I was looking at that stuff. That's pretty cool. And I'd love for you to explain a little bit more what's going on with that and how that kind of plays into
the reason why I really love my position at Fuga is, of course, management is so dear and close to my heart, but you're working so intimately with just a handful of artists. Whereas with Fuga, my clients are record labels, not artists, and my reach to make change and to influence is so much bigger now, and I love that, and it lets me sit closer to the music, which is why I got into this to begin with. And I think it's so interesting to help navigate the world of streaming with these labels, and figure out how to amplify the artist's message even further and help them with the strategy behind it and help them put together their marketing plans that best send a message out to the world. And something that matters a lot to me is, and I know we'll talk about this a bit more, but how do we create change in dance music? Because dance music is one of the fastest moving industries that there is in the world, but we need to make sure that we are staying progressive. And because I have eyes and ears across so many labels, I can suggest remixers that are trans or non-binary producers or people of color, and urge labels to sign more artists that way, and or to at least hire a remixer and commission a remix of someone who is not someone they normally work with. And I think also with the way that we communicate our releases to the DSPs to really highlight some of these artists that are deserving, my ability to influence changes is quite a bit faster than with just being a manager.
So cool. I've got the site pulled up as well, and it's so for anybody listening, Fuga, flexible music distribution, marketing services, right? Very tech heavy. And I love this full suite of products. I'm like your guys' sponsor here. I think it's really cool. I love new emerging tech and how it's basically saying like, hey, artists, you're in control, but you're gonna need a set of tools, and there's a lot of different ways to do things. Let us help you organize it.
Yes.
Moving forward.
I am a stand for the indies.
Yes.
Forever and ever, and Fuga lets me do that.
I love that. I've been an independent since the beginning. Like, not as an artist, just like that idea of I remember being 18 years too soon, and in music industry, I was like, yeah, and then artists, they can do more with distribution for MP3s, and they're like, yeah, sure, and I'm like, but and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I don't believe I am, but like helping people and democratizing, helping people, besides creating win-wins, is actually also more profitable. Like, and I tried to explain that to industry folk in any industry, but like, I remember early on I would say, well, no, see, with MP3s, and I know that it's not like analog, I know that, but if you get wider distribution and lower overhead costs and your hard costs in the middle, well, you can give more back to the artist up front and make more on the back end. I'm like, that's an awesome idea, because then now you can steal away market share from other labels, because like you guys, like, people make more money here and they're happy and you're happy. Like, sure, kid. I mean, that's obviously old paradigm that's gone at this point, and then the music industry got wiped for a minute as it moved into the MP3. So I think it got forced into like, we need to change our business models, right?
Yes. Let's see, like every 6 years or so, there's a big change, and I am waiting for the one to happen now. And I do think is going to be blockchain related.
Yes.
and blockchain streaming. Yeah. And I think, the transparency of your royalties that blockchain can offer is just invaluable. It is what we need. And I completely 100% agree with your point just now. I think when the artist gets to take home more, they get to reinvest back into the music, which is only going to help everyone.
You bring up a great point with blockchain streaming, blockchain in general. The taco example, right? Well, now it's like the utility case gets to be like, hey, anybody that's purchased this, you'll be in line for a set of tacos. I'll deliver it to you. Keep the token. If you ever sell the token, not only do I get a royalty, you get paid for that token, and then the new person also gets the tacos, and hence the chain of events that happen from that NFT. There's so much utility that people, it's very, very new, and I know a lot of people went like crazy, like, oh my God, you can make millions. Like, but more importantly, generational wealth and how royalties can work, and the transparency and the artist. We're at the beginning of the artist consumer relationship that happened starting last year. So you're right. I'm curious about the next 3 to 5 years and what blockchain.
Yeah, we're due for something.
Yeah. And it's cool. I think the hype this year with NFTs allows people to start going, I need to explore this. And then humbles them to go, It may take a little bit of time, like, yes, usually it does in the digital world. Usually it does, but it's worth the ride. It's definitely worth the ride.
At least there was mass awareness and introduction with the NFTs.
Yes.
And now, since people were forced to learn about it, they are now grappling their heads about it and can be more innovative and find more application for it.
Yes, early adoption. Although I'm sure it didn't help when they saw Grimes like, was it like 2.3 or 3.2 million in like a matter of minutes? Like, wait, what? It's funny that week there were a lot of music managers that were like, wait. You're like, yes. Yeah, I hope you were having a good relationship with your artist. So this leads me, the question of the dance industry, and you started to allude to this. It's changing. Where would you like to see it go? What was happening in 2019 that you're like, it's time for a revolution? We're in the middle of a global revolution, so we'll keep to the music. So where do you see it go, and in relation maybe to this new emerging world that's happening too with Web 3.0, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I definitely want to thank all my mentors for challenging me to think this way. But on the touring level, how do we make sure that our stages look different and that it is diverse and inclusive of new acts? And also, there were so many artists who were so successful in the pandemic, making sure that they are reflected in these lineups. And it's not just a legitimate copy and paste from 2019, and giving the space to artists who are very well deserving, who made their name in the pandemic, and make sure that they are able to tour as well in 2022, if that's the year that we come back. And also on the streaming side, and I think the streaming side, because they didn't get shut down because of the pandemic, has done a really good job with their initiatives in the past year and a half, showcasing artists who are from different backgrounds and different sounds, and programming them so that different faces are seen and doing that. And I think also there's a responsibility of the DSPs, especially in dance music, because there are so many subgenres, making sure that all of these subgenres are also getting light, because these are still people and careers, and they deserve to be discovered as well. So not just programming one sound, but programming lots of different kinds of sounds, and giving an equal platform for discovery. And the algorithm side of Spotify is great for that. So because it gives opportunities for artists to not depend solely on editorial, but with the release radars and the Spotify algorithmic playlists, it gives a more equal playing field to be able to speak to the fans that they have hard earned, and not just depending on editorial playlists.
I think it's so exciting for undiscovered talent more than ever.
Yeah.
And the amount of impact, again, kind of with this newer community based, I've been preaching community for a while, but I feel like it's clearly being more demonstrated. You can have a community of 5,000 and dominate, like in your corner of the web, in your corner of the world. And yeah, if you get a little caught up on the mental health side, right, of like, I need millions. I'm like, no, look, if you're about to fill an auditorium right now and you had 5,000 people like diehards, which by the way, let's just say they wanted to pay you $10 a month for, constantly coming up with new music on your Patreon account. That's $50,000 a month, friend. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're doing all right. You're doing all right. Like, even at $10 a month. And then, that's where I think it's our responsibility in the world too, to also let that be known to people, like, hey, by the way, you're talented. You don't need anything crazy just yet. And on your growth trajectory, there's lots of great ways to grow you appropriately and accordingly and patiently with all these tools.
Yes. There are so many different definitions of success, and we shouldn't be blind to all of them, and be open-minded about different ideas of success. Success doesn't necessarily mean going on tour. Success can be having the most engaged audience who are continually supporting you, who are buying your merch, and is unique to you, and that is still successful.
Yeah, it's so true. I spoke with Illmind a long while back, and and he he challenges with the internet all the time, all the time, and it's always been fascinating to watch as he keeps doing something new. And but that's exactly it, is that the conversation of, we can look at touring and we could say, which is also very physically exhausting, but then when you also automate some, like, you can make your 10, 20, 30 million over here, or you can make your 1-2 million over here and invest it over here and invest it over here and invest it over here, and suddenly that's working for you. And then you can tour kind of more at a level that's good for your body versus so there's so many, you're right, the level success. I'm a big proponent of, we shouldn't tie either a metric or a title or a position or a look, because there's more than, as they say, more than one ways to do something, right? There's always that more than one ways to skin a cat, right? So it's like this, and it allows us to come out of the box of thinking that's what I have to look like in order to be successful.
Yeah, because you could get booked on the main stage of Coachella, or you could play a smaller stage at a different time and just have the most engaged fan base that are just dancing, and they're there for you. And there's both are success,
right?
But one looks different on paper than the other, and I think we just need to change our perspectives about that, because it is both success.
That's it. It's so important. So, and mentally, so important people to know, be like, hey, okay, well, they paid, let's just say they had to pay for their opportunity on a Coachella. You performed to 3,000 people over here in a smaller stage. You made 10x what this person made. And you also, they bought a bunch of your merch. They also are earning more engaged. So is this more because you need to validate something internally at the ego level, at that lower chakra, what's going on, and I get it, because we, I think there's also the impact that we all, innately want to have, but doing our own work is a great part of that impact. So you bring up a very good point. We have to change the perspective of success. That's it right there. Incredible. What do you have coming up? Anything that you're really excited about that's about to happen, or anything new?
I am making the permanent move to Amsterdam in October. So anyone who is landing in the city, please come say hi, hang out, come to the Fuga offices, and
and it's incredible.
Music. Hopefully, grab some sandwiches and eat some cheese and
nice. And where can everybody find you online if they want to interact, or they want to reach out, or learn more?
Instagram, my handle is Chow, CHCHOW, and on Twitter it is Chow because Chow was already taken.
You should trademark your name.
I think about this often. I don't think I'll ever take anyone else's last name. Connie Chow has such a great alliteration to it, and I worked very hard for my own identity. I'm not about to change my name.
That's so well said. And that's what everybody, I think, in this world is really striving mostly for, is knowing and having a relationship with their own identity, right? So it's everything. Connie, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate having you on and talking about all these things. I can't even believe it's even been over an hour. It goes fast. It goes so fast, really, right? Fast. Yes. Incredible. Thank you so much for being on the show and for being a part of this, movement that we're doing, and just, telling your story and your background, your experience. It's incredible. And, continued success. I wish you much continued success. We'll keep up with each other, and thank you again.
Please do.
Absolutely.
Yes, I really enjoyed this. What an engaging conversation.
Amazing. He's hanging back for 1 second. For everybody listening, again, I cannot thank you guys enough each week for tuning in to On Top of the Covers. It means more than you possibly know. I love doing this. We love doing this, and we love having incredible conversations. Please continue to give us the feedback. Please continue to give us the 5-star reviews on Apple. It definitely helps. If you want to reach out to us, at We Are Orlove on Instagram, at Matt Gottesman on Instagram. And if you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify or iHeart or radio.com or Google Play or anywhere, if you're listening to it, you can watch this on our YouTube channel and subscribe there. We would love to have you there. You can comment in there and we'll get back to you. Yes, it's us managing it. We will get back to you. That's part of what a community does. We appreciate each and every one of you guys for constantly tuning in, and we're out.